Welcome to the Untitled Cars Show. I am your host, Ike. Proc is out again, and we are back with a very quick episode from the last one. We have David back on the show, and I'm hoping nothing bad happens to the computer today. So, David, thanks again for being on the show. For those of you who didn't hear last episode, David is illustrator and a car enthusiast and has had some fantastic cars. And I wanted to bring him on the show. Thanks again for coming back so quick, Dave.
No problem.
Uh,
Thanks for having me again.
yeah. Oh man. Um, yeah, I only had that screw up one other time, and it happened to Justin Hughes, which was a couple episodes ago. Everything's sorted, so we're good. So let's just kind of like go over some of the stuff we covered the last time here. So one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show, and one of the things I want to talk to you on the show is, is you owned a Subaru 360 and you drove it from Colorado to Georgia, and I just
Uh-huh.
thought that was such a fascinating tale. And I know, again, it kind of feels like dragging up stuff because we just talked about it yesterday, but it is like such a great story. Like if we could like just briefly go over that again.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I have a Subaru 360 that I bought when I was still a teen. It was my first car. It was not the first car I drove, but the first car I bought.
Mhm.
And I had owned it for several years and was putting it together. And then I moved to Georgia, and some stuff came up. I had to basically move the car to Georgia, and I couldn't afford to trailer it or have someone move it for me. So my only option really was to go out to Colorado and drive the Subaru back to Georgia.
Mhm. And that's kind of like where the tale begins. And one of the things I find so fascinating about it is you started driving it and you started having difficulties with it, like you do with any car of that age, obviously. And you made it just to the western boundary of Kansas with like fuel line issues. And
Uh huh.
then you met up, kind of briefly going through it again. You made it to Kansas and you met up with, you parked and you were fixing the fuel. Were you fixing the fuel issue when you went and found when the guy with the Corvette from the,
Well, I couldn't quite figure out what the problem was, so I was kind of just tinkering with the engine. But I didn't have a toolkit with me. I didn't really have a full toolkit. I only had like an adjustable wrench and some screwdrivers and stuff. And I was trying to basically make sure that everything was tight and there were no like leaks in the manifold or the cylinder gaskets or anything like that. And while I was working there, this guy pulled up and he was towing behind his truck. He was towing an early '60s Corvette. Basically, looked like he had just pulled it out of a barn. It was all oxidized, crinkled paint, and he was pumping gas into his truck.
Mhm.
So I came over and I asked him, about the car, and I asked him if he might have any wrenches or anything in his truck. And he was like, "Okay, yeah, give me a moment, I'll take a look." And he looked around, dug through his truck, and he's like, "I don't actually really have any tools with me." But he came over and took a look at the Subaru, and he was very interested in the car and happy to see that someone was going to take the time to put it back in order. And he did me a huge favor, and he went into the gas station. I didn't ask him to do any of this; he just did this on his own. And when he came back out, he had one of those cheap socket sets that they sell at gas stations,
Mhm.
and he just gave it to me, as a gift. Said, "Good luck. I hope you get where you're going." And it's just one of those things, from one car enthusiast, another car enthusiast, someone who just wants to help out, appreciates that you like old cars and you're gonna fix it up and make it work.
Yeah. That's just like such a like great like piece of like the car culture as a whole in my mind. Like, people I think have like this idea in their mind, and people listening obviously are probably car enthusiasts, but a lot of people who are in the general like populace have like this picture in this mind of like, oh, Fast and Furious, like guy dude bros, and all they care about is horsepower and numbers and blah blah blah. And if it's not a Skyline, and you're not racing a Ferrari, it's just not or like car people. And then like real honest to goodness car people love like interesting cars, and they like seeing people keep like a thing like the Subaru 360 alive. I mean, it's a for those of you who've never seen one, they're tiny little Japanese K cars, and they're like, we went over this a little bit last time, but they're basically the first like mode of transportation that really got the Japanese people off of two wheels and into four wheels back in, what when did those cars come out? Do you have any idea? Like, was it in the
The
50s or early 60s?
the first 360 came out in 1958.
Mm,
So it was one of the very first K cars to actually be put into mass production.
yeah.
Suzuki had already come out with a car in like 1956 or seven or like that,
Mhm.
but they only had them in very limited production. They're only making like a few hundred a year. So Subaru was really the first company to actually get a car into mass production for that class.
Yeah. And it's such a perfect little car for Japan, and it's not so much a good car for, the States, cruising down the highway in a car the size of a shoebox. It, but
Uh-huh.
it's such a great story to me that it's like you had in not on his own, like you didn't like have to go like begging for it, and it wasn't like like, oh, he's really in a bad way. It was just like, here's something for you because one car guy to another car guy, and there's been like tales of that every time someone owns, I feel like, an old car, like they kind of understand like the love other people have for like other quirky little business. So obviously you made it from Colorado to Kansas, and then
Hmm.
you were having the issue, and then what ended up being the issue with the vehicle? I'm not even sure if we got to that by that point. Like,
Well, I had a couple different things that came up. When I got into Missouri, the exhaust system had a crack in it, and so I stopped and had that welded up.
hmm
And while I was at the shop where they was doing the welding, the mayor came by and he took a look at the Subaru and he thought it was the coolest thing ever.
yeah,
And after chatting with the shop guys for a bit, he just took off. And for a while, the car was running pretty good, but I had an intermittent problem
hmm
where the car would basically bog down. It would get stuck going about 50 miles an hour and it wouldn't go any faster. And so I couldn't figure out what it was, and I had my I I called my girlfriend and had her log into my account on Japanese nostalgic car on their forums and post a question.
yeah,
And somebody suggested that it was a problem with distributor.
hmm
So I think I was in Kentucky. I was at a truck stop and I had to take the distributor apart. And they were right. It was the distributor advance was not working. It's got just a regular centrifugal advance,
yeah,
and the flyweights had gotten stuck. They had rust on them. They wouldn't fly out.
hmm.
So I had to take that all apart, oiled the weights, put it all back together. I didn't have a timing light, so I just I had a magnifying glass, and I just looked at the points and
Yeah.
would slowly turn the pulley on the engine until I just barely saw the parts start to open up, and that's how I set the timing to get it running again.
Where did you actually do the work on the distributor? I'm picturing like in my mind, like you sitting in like the booth at a Waffle House, like taking apart a distributor, or was it all just like out in the open and like people are walking by?
Yeah, I was at a truck stop, and I just kind of parked in the corner away from everybody else,
Mm,
and it was that's mostly because it was nighttime, so I parked as close to like the lamp that was lighting up the parking lot as possible, so I could see what I was doing.
I gotcha.
And yeah, I just had the whole thing apart there in the parking lot.
Mhm. It is there a car like that you can think of that like is as small as that is and gets as much attention from people as that? Because that thing just has to like get it got smiles and like people looking at it. Like it's such a cute little like adorable little car, and you can't help but love it. So
Uh-huh. Well,
it,
it's about the same size as a Fiat 500, the original one,
yeah,
and it's a little bit smaller than the British Mini, which everybody loves too.
yeah, yeah. The great thing that I like the 500 a lot, and that just might be like my Italian heritage shining through on that. I really want to find one in good condition, but They are next to impossible to find now in the regional Cinquecento, and I want like a Mini would be fine, but Mini being front wheel drive kind of like spoils it for me. Like just
Uh-huh.
like having like a small car like that to turn a two-car garage into a three-car garage would just be absolutely ideal for me.
Uh-huh.
And I can't think of
Well,
it.
I like the Fiat 600. It doesn't get as much attention,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an easier car to find, and I think my personal experience is that it's a more fun car to drive actually.
Huh. I have to keep my eye out. Like my when I'm in my downtime and I just put into Craigslist Fiat and just search for
Uh-huh.
anything old, and that's just kind of like just show me something interesting from it. Like I think there was an Abarth 600 in Virginia, but they wanted like 16 grand for it. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
not paying that for that. Where did you find this little Subaru 360 anyway in the middle of Colorado? Like, how did you come about this car?
I had actually been well, the very first thing that happened was I saw a Subaru 360 on display at a Subaru dealership on Broadway in Denver, and I was fascinated by it because I'd never seen one before,
Hmm.
and like I was aware of the Fiat 500, and I was like, well, that looks like a Fiat 500, but it's kind of, it's kind of rounder. It doesn't look quite the same.
Hmm.
I eventually, went in and looked at the car, and I was, I immediately had to have one, and so I looked up the Subaru 360 Drivers Club. Way back in the day, they had like a GeoCities website,
Yeah.
and they had like a message board. And I just happened to find some guy who had bought two Subaru 360s at an estate sale in Montana, and nobody wanted to drive out to Montana to pick them up. So I actually ended up getting one of them, for only $400,
Oh,
and we brought it back to Colorado where I started working on it.
that's fascinating. I wonder who that man was or woman was who owned two Subaru 360s at that late stage in life. Like that had to be an interesting individual. Maybe
I
like a
don't.
demo
It's
derby or something.
I don't know who the exact previous owner was, but I found in the car there was an old title from the 70s, and it was owned by the local high school.
Huh.
And I think it might have been used for like an automotive class, or maybe, maybe even like driver training, as crazy as that sounds.
Well, I'm almost thinking like I could see like a school being like, we want to start an automotive class, but we don't want to pay to open up a bay door. So what car can we fit through a door? Like, well, this or a Fiat 500. That's pretty much it. So it's such a great little car, the little 360, and I absolutely want. It's one of the few cars like, yeah, I'd seen a McLaren P1 in real life would be interesting, but like that car and like a Peel, like the old like little itty bitty Isle of Man car, like one of
Mhm.
those in real life would just be like absolutely ideal to like get to see.
Uh-huh.
And I'm so super jealous you actually got to drive a Subaru 360. Uh,
Well, I've actually had a ride in a Peel Trident before,
oh my god.
and it was basically the most terrifying experience of my entire life. That thing going only 20 miles an hour, it feels like you're gonna die. You're sitting super low to the ground like a go kart,
Yeah.
and it's just made of plastic. So,
Uh,
if anything happens, you're toast.
yeah. The Trident's the one with the weird bubble top, right? It's not the
Yeah,
like
it's got the plexiglass bubble on top.
yeah, the quote unquote sport version. Like did okay, you get the fact that you can fit two people in that just boggles my mind. So you were riding in it with someone,
Uh huh.
and there are very few things like abjectly fearful of. Like my wife loves roller coasters,
Uh
and
huh.
God bless her, I hate roller coasters. There's something about being out of power and like not being able to control your own destiny that I just absolutely dislike. But at least in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I know this was engineered by a whole bunch of smart people, and if stuff happens, then they're in a whole bunch of trouble and blah blah blah. But then being an appeal, like especially to try it and not being at the controls, would just terrify the crap out of me. Yeah, I can't. And you made it back alive.
Yeah,
What city was it in? Because that's gonna give me a good idea of what the traffic was.
I was actually in Los Angeles for the Unique Little Car Show, and the owner showed up with his Peel Trident, and he drove it on the cruise, drove it to the dinner everywhere, and he was giving people rides, and I had to get a ride in it.
I'm hoping it was a older gentleman, so he didn't drive like a maniac.
He was an older gentleman and he drove like a maniac.
Oh, okay. L.A. man, potholes in L.A. are bigger than like that car. Like, that's just like
Uh-huh.
crazy. So now like you're on the like top of the list of like super jealous of like people's lives. You've been in appeal and you've owned a Subaru 360. Like now, see that would be an ideal. So you could get a Peel, you could get a Fiat 500, and like a you know Subaru 360, probably like maybe even another Mini, another like 500, and all put them in like a standard two car garage and just be
Uh-huh.
amazing. Like I think you don't even need like jacks because all those cars weigh like 2 pounds. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I kind of lost my train of thought on that, but like man, I really want. I've seen a Peel. I've never been in one. So um, you drive into Subaru 360, you make it like that's the biggest trouble you have is distributor, and then you finally make it to Atlanta, and that's the end of like the tale. Like how like just to give like the listeners kind of an idea, like how was it to drive? Like was it terrifying or was it more like just like for fuck's sake go faster? Like how was it like experience wise?
It's actually it's very interesting that you mentioned that because it handles like a much bigger car.
Hmm.
It doesn't really feel like you're driving a small car. Like the worst part of that experience was just the noise because you've got, little air-cooled two-cylinder, two-stroke, and by the time you're doing, 50, 55, it basically just sounds like a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
And you hear that, for 1,500, 1,800 miles, whatever the distance is. And that was definitely the worst part of that experience. But like, it's actually a very sure-footed car. It doesn't really like you expect with an old car, especially one that weighs that little, that it'd be blown around all over the road when you're on the highway. But it stays in place really well, even when the semi trucks are passing, whatever. And
Hmm.
it handles pretty much like a bigger car, so it wasn't that bad in that sense.
Yeah.
But it was also, it's very slow to get up to speed because you've only got 25 horsepower working for you.
Yeah. Was it like did you eat in it? Like that's the other thing because it's got what three on the tree or three on the floor. I'm imagining like
It's
manual shift.
got it's got a four-speed on the floor.
Really that old and has a 4 speed.
They originally had a three-speed, and
Hmm.
the four-speed was an option in Japan, but it came standard on the U.S. version.
Ah, yeah. Because like I like to spread out when I meet. Like I like to do some road trips. I like to spread out. I like to enjoy a burger, enjoy some fries, and then like you kind of need space for all that, not to make a mess. So I can't imagine eating in such a small, confined little space. but
Uh-huh.
but
Well, I mean, I slept in it too because the front seats fold all the way down, so you can just set the seat back all the way down onto the rear seat, and it forms like a cot.
yeah, that's amazing. I guess not for nothing, but like we kind of touched on this, and I'll figure I'll just jump right into this. Like it's a very Japanese car. Like it's kind of like built to a purpose, and because it is one of their first cars they ever made, I guess it would make sense that it was kind of like there's not a ton of space in Japan, so you need something small, and you need something that I guess back in like the 60s, if you're driving from southern Japan to like northern Japan, you're going to be in the car for a while and you might need a place to sleep. You know, they probably planned for like a lot of stuff in that car that you wouldn't even think about planning for in a car now. And it's just like very like it's ever so Japanesey, and that's kind of what I think is so endearing about those types of cars. So
Uh-huh.
I,
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting. I like again on the seats. I was expecting to be really uncomfortable because it's a bench seat and the cushioning is really thin.
mhm.
But actually, I didn't have a problem, with my back or anything. The entire trip, it was actually really comfortable.
Mm. It, it's a it's a fun little car, and um, it's a shame you did eventually have to sell it, and we touched on it before on the last show that's now missing, but it wasn't really the first car you started driving because it was not, you know, in running
Yeah,
condition when you
it was
started
just a
driving.
project for me.
Yeah. So,
And
hmm,
my first car was a first generation Tercel, 1982 Toyota Tercel.
yeah, which is and again, this is something you taught me on the last show or one the missing episode is I didn't realize that is was it a lateral? I can't even think of the word. That
It's yeah, it's a longitudinal engine
yeah,
um,
in a front wheel drive car.
in a front wheel drive car, and Toyota actually did this to save a little money because they figured they wouldn't have to rejig their production line to put a transverse engine in.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because it's not a very normal car, but it's one of those cars where you still see a lot of them today because it is such an old, reliable workhorse. So
Uh-huh.
so you had that for a couple of years, and then you ended up getting well. What did
Yeah,
yeah you traded?
I
Yeah,
I sold the Tercel to a friend of mine in high school,
yeah,
and ended up buying a Renault Lacar.
yeah, that's right. And the Lacar again, like it's a sofa with like little like caster wheels, like the things that you told me what they were 13 inches.
Yeah,
Yeah.
13-inch wheels,
You-
three lugs on the wheel.
Oh, I didn't realize there's a three.
Yep,
Weird
just
little,
three.
weird little French car, and they're fucking love the front wheel drive. And again, I can't imagine like I went to kind of a preppy high school in my area, like like oh everyone's driving BMWs and blah blah blah, and I was like the jokester, like driving around a Mercury Tracer. I can't imagine showing up in a car to high school. Like how did that go over?
Oh yeah, it was well, like a lot of people actually really liked that car, and we would fit like six people in it, and it was amazing because it's got a torsion bar suspension, and it's a very soft suspension. So you get like six people in the car, and it'd be sitting about 2 or 3 inches off the ground. But even then, you couldn't bottom it out. You
Uh,
would drive over like a speed bump or a pothole, and it wouldn't do anything. And when you have only like two or three people in it, you can take that car over a speed bump at 30 miles an hour. It doesn't phase it. Like
that actually might be the perfect teenage car. Then just you
yeah,
can't break it. Yeah. Man, I can't. We the Lacar like that. How old was that when you first got it?
um,
Like
I
generally,
can't remember the year. It was made in 1978. I remember
yeah.
that.
So like basically like almost like a 30-year-old car by the time you're probably driving it around.
Hmm. And
29.
I
Hmm.
and I that one was just one. It was parked in someone's driveway by my school, and basically my friend was like, "You should buy that."
Yeah.
So I left a note under the windshield wiper, and the guy called me, and I ended up buying it for like $450.
Is that the same friend that you sold it to sell to?
Yeah.
Maybe he had ulterior motives. Like, get that. Yeah, no. Yeah, give up your reliable Japanese car and go buy that weird French one and give me the Japanese car. So I still can't believe. So you had you're on your third car, and by my estimate, you still spent less than $1,500 on all three of them at this
Pretty
point.
much.
Yeah. So the Lacar, and it's such a fascinating little vehicle because it is so utterly French. And that was, didn't Dodge have a weird version of that as their own, like some weird capture import thing of that thing? But
Dodge imported a Mitsubishi.
yeah, I thought they
They
did.
had they had this weird Mitsubishi hatchback with like the twin stick transmission. I remember that.
Yeah, I thought that for some reason they like marketed the Lacar as like some sort of like weird Dodge. But I'm kind of speaking on my ass at the moment because like it just maybe it just seems like Dodge because every Dodge I've ever touched has just been an unreliable piece of crap. So, b- but prove me wrong, Dodge. I'll gladly take a car and be proven wrong. But yeah, it's such a fun. I don't know. There's nothing really offensive about a car. Like you, see, the weird thing at this point, like a lot of car people like to like bust balls and like make jokes on. But there's really nothing that offensive about driving a car. It's just kind of weird French transportation.
Uh-huh.
And how did that go driving that thing around in Colorado in in the high altitude with like the weird winters and all that?
It was a great handling car. I mean, when they were new, all the magazines raved about them. They loved the car when it came out. The whole idea idea that it was like a crappy car came later,
Hmm.
um, mostly from people who never owned one.
Yeah.
Um, its one real fault was that they all rusted out, but I mean that's pretty much every '70s car.
Yeah. But like you ended up racing a Ferrari, if I remember right.
Oh, Corvette.
Corvette, that's right.
Yeah, I was up somewhere in like the foothills, and we were visiting my mom's friends or something. And while we were there, it started snowing. And within about 20 minutes, there was already about 2 inches of snow on the ground. So we're like, oh, we better get going.
Hmm.
And it took us a while to find the highway because the snow plows hadn't come out yet. So we're driving really slow. And when we finally got to the highway, we were going under the underpass to make a left turn onto the on ramp, and there were two lanes there, and so there was myself and the car on the left hand on the left side turn lane, and then the next lane next to me, also making a left, was a Corvette, a yellow Corvette, and yeah, when the light turned green, I stepped on the gas, and the car just scooted off up the ramp, and the Corvette got stuck. They couldn't even get through the intersection.
It's that had to be the worst day, and that Corvette owner's like, I was beaten by a car.
Yeah.
So, so what ended up happening with the car then? Like, how did it meet its inevitable fate?
Yeah. Well, eventually it just exploded.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I
I
remember
had,
head gasket. So,
yeah, the head gasket blew. I was driving with my friend back in Denver. We had stopped off at a Volkswagen show earlier that day. We're on our way down, and right as we were getting to the Broadway exit, like a little bit before the Broadway exit, the car started making a ticking sound. And oh, that's not good. The car's not supposed to make new sounds.
yeah,
And so I let off the gas a little, and the ticking sound went away. But there are all these people coming up behind us, so I stepped on the gas again, and the ticking sound came back, and then a couple seconds later, all of the warning lights in the dash come on, and then there's just a giant white cloud just poofs out of the back of the car, and the engine stops. And that was it. We pushed it into the bus stop parking lot, and there was antifreeze coming out of the tailpipe and like a big puddle under the engine. Like, well, that's pretty much the end for that car.
yeah. That's all she wrote. Yeah. Oh, fuck that sucks. I hate head gasket stuff. But yeah, I think for those of you who don't know, getting my head gasket fixed on my V70R, that's gonna be crappy. In theory, it should be done tomorrow though, so we'll see how that works out. So I might have,
That's good.
yeah, let's hope. Let's hope they don't A, rip me off, and B, like, well, we told you it's gonna be 2 grand. Turns out, I know Steve Leto. Like, I'll go call him. But so I have to have a favor with him somewhere. I know, but so you had the Car, and then from the Car you went to what?
I had a 1980s Subaru GL for a little while, which was not the most exciting car. It was weird and it was cool, but it wasn't really fun to drive. And it was just kind of like cramped and claustrophobic inside, and I never really warmed up to it.
Man, not so much like kind of like a bad appliance, not so much like a car. Like not something you could give a name to within. Like
Yeah, it never really stuck with me, and that was I actually paid a lot of money for that car, so it was a big disappointment.
mm. And what ended up happening with that? Like what?
I eventually sold it. The one of the joints for the drive shaft to the rear wheel drive, because it was 4-wheel drive, went out,
Mhm.
and I decided I didn't want to put any more money into it, so I sold it off for way less than I paid.
How long did you have it?
I think I had that car for about a year and a half.
Yeah, like that's like that like general malaise point. Like if you're feeling like you don't like a car, like in the first 3 months, you might kind of warm up to it. But if you're going from I don't like this car, well over a year, it just get rid of it. I guess at that point, and that goes for all owners of every car and everything.
Yeah.
But it's yeah. So you went from that thing basically you lost money on, and then what did you pop into?
I got I think it was like a '97 Tercel, the last generation Tercel,
Hmm.
and I got the best one with the twin cam engine and the 5-speed gearbox, and it was a wonderful car. I mean, it was a very plain car, but it did its job. It was comfortable, and it got really good gas mileage.
Hmm.
And that car was totaled. I got rear-ended by a uninsured driver at a red light, and they just smashed the heck
Oh,
out of that car.
yeah. No, it figures you finally find a car that's kind of it's good. It does what you want, and it does basically everything well. And it's kind of endearing, kind of like a good. It's like a Labrador Retriever, I guess, if you're a dog person. It does everything you want it to do. Everyone always gets a lab at some point in their life, but that's fine. And then, of course, it just gets ruined and just like can't have nice things. So,
Yeah.
but
And he was like, the guy was like, "Oh, I have friends who have a body shop and they can fix this." It's like, no,
yeah,
like he didn't understand. Like the entire rear end of the car is all welded together. They have to like cut it in half and weld on an entire half of the car.
yeah.
It's not going to get fixed.
No, w- what did he rear end you with? What kind of car? Like
I
pickup?
think he had some sort of old Toyota pickup.
Yeah, it's
That's
always
what
an
I'm
old Toyota
remembering.
pickup. Well, it's funny, and it's I don't know. Is Denver one of those states where you have to have insurance all the time, or is it one of like the weird
Yeah,
couple of
you are
states?
required to insure all your vehicles.
Mm, yeah, so it always figures the guy who goes, well, I'll just drive around without insurance, always knows a guy who's got a body shop somehow. This
Yeah.
factors into it, like, oh, it'll be fine. Like it'll be like just long enough to like bait you off until the cops don't come, and then we'll just be fine with it. So and you'll never see from me ever again. But
Uh-huh.
that had to be like heartbreaking. So you went from you know boring planned car you didn't like to this nice Tercel that's like I like to shit on Toyotas a lot, but there's not really much I can make fun of with the Tercel again. Like you know you wanna find a fault in it, but it's like you can't really find a fault in the Tercel, and then that goes away. So then what did you move into?
I got my 1982 Tercel back from my friend.
Yeah.
He went to college and he left the car in Colorado. And I was like, "Look, my other car got totaled." And he's like, "Oh, just take the Tercel back." And it had been sitting for a while, and it had a major problem with rust on the rear suspension arms,
Mhm.
which turned out to be covered by a recall by Toyota. So I took in my $600 1982 Tercel
Yeah.
to the Toyota dealer, and they did $1,200 worth of work on it for the recall.
That had to be mind-boggling to them that they had to do that at that point. Like, I don't know when the recall probably was announced, but it was probably announced like I'm imagining like a couple of years before this at the very least. It's like, no one's gonna bring in an '82 Tercel to get, and here's the guy. So, but no, like I said, the only way that could possibly be better is if they would have given you a loaner during that period of like a nice new Camry or something. So,
Yeah, I should have asked. I should have
yeah,
been like, "Oh well, it's my only car. What am I going to drive?"
yeah.
I mean, you guys sold me a defective Toyota.
How many owners did that first Tercel go to? Do you have any idea? Like,
I was the second owner and the fourth owner.
that had to be going through the Carfax. Like, wait a minute, but that's crazy to me that 82, car. So they had it for quite a while before you got your hands on it. And what about the second Tercel? Any idea how many owners before you?
I don't know. I might have been the second owner. I might have been the third owner. I know that
Mm,
with the '80s Tercel, I think when I bought it, it was 18 or 19 years old at that point.
yeah,
So it was hitting it was in its slump value period. It hadn't not old enough to be, any collector interest.
yeah,
But yeah, they took good care of it, and it was a great car when I had it. Great car in the snow. I think probably the best snow car I've had. And in fact, the guy I bought it from
mm,
had, a Ford Bronco, but he said the Tercel was his ski car because it did so good in the snow.
yeah. Well, that's one of the things, and I'm sure you might be able to back me up on this. Living in Chicago and now living out here in Maryland, people a lot of times will be like, "Oh, you're used to like Chicago winters. Like, what kind of car should I get?" I'm thinking about getting a giant 4-wheel drive thing to deal with the snow. I'm like, go get a small front-wheel drive car. It'll be a million times better in the snow than your giant lifted like piece of crap like was it? I keep seeing the stupid Jeep Cherokees everyone always gets, like the old used Jeep Cherokees. And then
Uh-huh.
inevitably every year, when the first big snowfall hits, and by first big snowfall in Maryland, I mean about a quarter of an inch, these things are just in ditches. Like people get up to speed with their stupid 4-wheel drive, and then they either don't know how to use this 4-wheel drive and put it in low and then just go careening off somewhere, or
Uh-huh.
they just don't understand they can't brake now because they have a fucking like 2-ton piece of shit hauling down the highway and the brakes don't work because it's snowing and 4-wheel drive doesn't help with fucking braking, and then they put it in the ditch and it boggles my mind and they just don't understand 2-wheel drive is almost better in snow because you don't have that weird false sense of confidence of
Uh-huh.
having 4-wheel drive.
Well,
So
I think one of the big things is, a light car doesn't slide as far
yeah.
when you're trying to stop.
Mhm.
And the other thing is like if when you're in snow, you really want to have a narrow tire that doesn't try to climb the snow, just cuts through it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and again, that's you're looking at a Tercel, like it's that generation before like everyone started putting really stupid fat tires on cars. Like even
Uh-huh.
my like first Saturn, I think had like what was it? Probably about like a 10-inch tire, maybe. I'm
Hmm.
trying to go based on math, maybe 8 to 10 inches. But a Tercel, I can't imagine was more than like 5 or 6 inches of like tire width. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's like it's just get something old, get something front wheel drive. If you're not used to snow, especially front wheel drive, don't get the false sense of confidence and get something old that you don't care if it gets wrecked. So that's kind of that's the advice section of it. So I kind of lost my point where I'm going with all this. So you're out of the second Tercel, and then
Uh-huh.
at that point, is that where the like 5 year ish like spree of like lack of vehicles starts?
Yeah, eventually the Tercel was getting to the point where I couldn't really fix it anymore. I ended up selling it for basically nothing.
Mm,
Um, it needed a new clutch. The clutch was slipping, and it wouldn't stay in first gear. It would pop out of first gear, and I didn't have the money to have someone rebuild the transmission and put a new clutch in.
yeah.
And also, that was when I just got back to Savannah, so I was going to move. I was moving, so I sold the Subaru and I sold the Toyota. And then, for 5 years, I didn't own any cars at all. I moved to Austin,
Hmm.
and when I lived in Austin, I had a bicycle and then I had a moped, and that was pretty much it during that period.
Yeah. And this is something you blew my mind when we talked about, and I'm really sad we don't have my natural reaction to this. I did not. I still can't fathom this. You had a front wheel drive scooter,
Uh-huh.
which just sounds like madness to me. And then you did bring up it's French, which makes slightly more sense to me. But like again, like why? Like I don't know why they would do that. And at this point, you've owned a couple of really kind of like weird and like goofy cars. Like not many people like around like our age, like 20 something, early 30 somethings, like have owned a Le Car, for example.
Uh-huh.
You are the only person I've ever heard of who's owned a front wheel drive scooter. And how did you find the weird person who owned a front wheel drive scooter?
It was it was advertised on Craigslist. Someone actually put it in the bicycle section, and they owned like a lawnmower repair shop, and they had no idea what to do with it. So I went up and took a look at it, and then I made them an offer, for like $100. I'll get rid of it for you.
Hmm.
And the nice thing is they barely changed over all the years that they're making them. And I think at this stage in like 2010, they were actually still making them.
Hmm.
They just recently stopped making them. So I actually got all the parts that were missing off of the internet for really cheap,
Yeah.
and put it back into use. And it's a Velo Solex moped made by Solex, which is the carburetor company that did like the carbs for Volkswagens and all the French cars.
Yeah.
And But in addition to carburetors, they made a moped, which seems like the obvious thing to branch into, right?
Yeah, no, like again, it's kind of and like Top Gear did like a great thing on this. I think it was Renault, where it's like we made artillery shells, and now we're gonna make good fast cars, and then we're gonna make reliable cars, and now we're just gonna make crappy cars. And it's like I don't know what Soloplex was thinking, but it's like I imagine they were probably making ammunition back during like the First World War, and then it was like, well, we'll start making engines for airplanes or something probably, and then you know what, carburetors now because we're good at that, and you know what, fuck it, scooters. Like next week, bread. Like like the French, like God love them. I don't know if it's like ADD or whatever, but they can't make like a company can't stick with like a thing for too long before they just get bored with it. But the one thing they happen to stick with is fucking front wheel drive, and I don't like on a scooter. It still boggles my mind. And like, tell me like what's it like driving a front wheel drive scooter? And it's shocking to me like how non weird it is.
uh,
I guess.
well, it's kind of interesting. It's not once you get going, it's not that strange. But when you're doing low speeds, because the motor is mounted over the front wheel, you've got a lot of weight over the front wheel, so the handlebars want to flop around because you've got all that weight there. But
Yeah.
once you actually get moving and everything's in balance, it's not that weird. Um, Although, like one of the problems is that you weigh a lot more than the engine does. So unlike in a front-wheel drive car,
Mm-hmm.
there's no traction advantage. In fact, you get less traction with front-wheel drive on the moped because you weigh so much compared to the engine.
Yeah.
And you're sitting over the rear wheel, and the motor's sitting over the front wheel. And so, like, if it's raining outside or something like that, and you've got to go up a hill, the weight transfers to the back wheel. There's no weight on the front wheel,
Yeah.
and even though you only have 1 horsepower, the front wheel will start spinning on you.
Yeah. And then not good on a two-wheel drive car because you're gonna eat shit pretty much, right?
Yeah, not good on a two-wheel vehicle, especially when the wheel that's slipping is the one that also steers the vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah. I still like any reason why you can think of this is why they built this thing, front wheel drive, like just to be weird and different,
I
or
think. Well, there's actually there's some very peculiar reasons about this because one of the ideas is that it was cheaper because they could use a roller drive instead of a chain drive.
uh,
So the engine just goes through a clutch, and then there's a roller that sits on the tire. So it's like a friction drive between the roller and the tire. And there were a lot of mopeds in the 40s that were like this,
uh-huh,
but not all, very few of them used the front wheel. And there's a very interesting thing if you look up bicycle geometry,
yeah,
how the angles of how a bicycle is built, that affects handling.
mm-hmm,
So most people went with the British school of thought on how a bicycle should be built, where they're set up to handle having weight loaded over the rear wheel.
mm-hmm,
So when the British made, roller drive bike motors like this, they put them all on the back of the bike,
yeah,
which actually makes a lot of sense. But
mm-hmm,
the French, because they have to be different, they decided to design all their bicycles so that they handle better when you put the weight on the front wheel. So just combining like the French mindset towards bicycles
yeah.
with this idea of making a really low cost motor that you can put on a bike, and it just kind of all came together in one uh, one sort of rolling abomination.
Yeah, does it get like attention? Because like obviously it probably doesn't look like an average scooter because it probably has a giant protrusion or like tumor looking thing out the front. I would imagine. Like I just don't know how you, because I know the motor's tiny. It had to be like what, like 250 cc. I'm imagining
Oh
around there.
no, I mean it's a moped, so it's only a 49 cc,
Oh,
1 horsepower.
okay.
So it's a small thing, but it's got, because the motor's all on the front. The gas tank also has to be on the front wheel too.
Yeah,
So it's all one unit mounted over the front wheel. You've got your gas tank. There's a little cylinder sticking out the top, and there's like the magneto on the other side, and So it's all one unit, and it's basically just a like a um,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to describe it because it's got like a modular construction where all the different pieces are bolted together instead of having like a welded frame or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely not like any other moped or scooter out there.
Yeah. Like that's it's different and it's charming. I know I'm kind of like boggled my mind around it. I'm still kind of like, wow, like even I heard about it yesterday and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it today. But I just can't help but kind of like it because it's weird and different. Like a good example is around DC, everyone drives. It's like a knockoff version of a Vespa. Like if you see a
Uh-huh.
scooter, it's not an actual Vespa, but it might fool you for about like a half a second. Like, oh, that's a Vespa. Oh no, that's that stupid knockoff brand Vespa again. And it's kind of nice, like to see something so different rolling down, the street, and just be like, that's something you don't see a ton of. So I do appreciate that matter of fact of it, but it's like I'm still boggled. Like I don't know. I don't know why it just disturbs me so. Like the more I think
Well,
of it, the more I was just like front wheel drive scooter. Like I just don't get it. But
that's there's actually one really interesting point about these, and that it was actually illegal for them to do in the U.S. when they imported them, but in France, they were set up so that the throttle return spring wasn't a return spring; it held the throttle open. So you would let your hand off the twist grip,
yeah,
and it would open the throttle, and you only use the twist grip to throttle the engine down. So the opposite of every other motorcycle that's ever been made.
were they just trying to kill people who weren't used to this? Like it just sounds like it in everyone who's fun. We let them ride scooter, they die. Like like
They're like, oh, well, why should the engine be in the center of the bike? Why not on the front wheel? And
yeah,
why should the hand grip open the throttle? Why not close the throttle?
yeah. Yeah. I
You
guess I'm
know?
all for contrarian thinking. Like, why have we done it this way for forever? Why don't we try something different? Turns out the answer is because the way that everyone else has been doing it is the better way of doing it. But not always.
I made a joke about the Velo Solix moped, which was they had been constantly tweaking and developing it from the 1940s up until the late 70s,
Mhm.
about at the point where the engineers said, "Fuck it, this is stupid anyway."
It's true. It I just don't I just don't get the French people, I guess. Like, and you've owned two French cars. Like, not to get back, like anything else kind of just weird and goofy about the Le car? Like,
Yeah, plenty. For one, it's also got the longitudinally mounted engine, but the engine is mounted behind the transmission instead of in front of it. So technically, the car is a mid-engined car, but it's also front-wheel drive.
oh my god, like that just hurts my like. I'm never going to France now. Like this just hurts my head. L- l- uh, I was even thinking about that the other day. As I was sitting around, I was going, I wonder if there's ever been a mid-engine front-wheel drive car because you could do it in theory, and the answer to that is the Le car. Like that's maddening to me. So let's move on to something then more in my wheelhouse. So you're on the scooter, and then you finally make your way back into four-wheel drive transportation in the form of a Saab,
Yes.
and not just any Saab, but
Yeah, I got a 1973 Saab 96.
mhm,
I hadn't had a car for years, and it was getting to the point where I needed some weatherproof transportation. I needed something I could haul stuff around in, and so I needed a car again.
mhm.
And I decided that if I was going to buy a car, if I was going to spend, serious money on something, it should be a car that I've always wanted. And I had always wanted a Saab 96, and I had even gone to look at a few before. But then I always decide, you know what, I don't really need this car. I should get something else.
Yeah.
But this time I was like, no, I really want it this time.
Mhm. You need that little voice of reason sometimes just to shut up when you're doing car shopping. Like, you know what? It's not the perfect car, but it's the imperfections that make it the car I want. So just shut up, reason. You don't belong here. So it's it's a weird like it's a funny shape. It kind of has like that weird like duck bill shape almost to it, if I'm
Uh-huh.
remembering. And it's I like old Swedish cars, and like this is kind of like the start of Saab in the United States, is what you were telling me last time, right? Like
Hmm.
this is like the first mass-produced car they really sold here, and it has kind of a weird. You have a weird engine, but there is a weirder engine.
Yeah, the one I have is it's Saab had a Ford Germany V4. They
Mm.
started putting in the 96 starting in 1967, and they used it all the way up through 1980. And before they had the V4, they had a three-cylinder two-stroke.
Which normally when you have a V4, you go, "Oh, that's the weird engine option." But the three
And yeah,
cylinder,
the Saab 96 is probably the only car out there where the V4 option is not the weirder option for engines.
hmm and you sent me a nice clip of the audio of the V4, and I'm going to put that at the end. I haven't had a chance to listen to it because I running around here earlier, but it's you're telling me it sounds fairly good. Like it sounds throaty. It sounds like a V. It doesn't sound like as anemic
Yeah,
as I'm.
it's got a I mean it is a V engine. It's a 60-degree V4, and
Hmm.
it's basically like a V6 with two cylinders missing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's got a bit of a chunkier noise to it because
Yeah.
you've got a bit more you've got some more pauses in there than you do in a V6.
Yeah. It's kind of like I had the Challenger had a V8 and it would shut down four cylinders and it would shut them down on one bank. So I would have one side that's only running and the other side, and you would think it'd be louder when it was running with the eight cylinders all the
Uh-huh.
time, but it actually was louder when it was in the eco mode, which drove my then girlfriend, current wife, nuts because it was like we're on the highway and the car gets fucking louder and it's ridiculous. Like, well, that's because I have straight pipes, and that's what happens. Like, well, what's it doing? Well, it's going down to four cylinders. Shouldn't it be quieter? You would think that, but no. So, it like the V4, like it's such a weird little engine, but I love it so. And I think we talked about this the other day, where it's like normally if you're the sort of person who walks into like an auto parts place and say like, "Oh, I got the V4," they go, "You don't have a V4. No car has a fucking V4. You must have an inline four." No, it turns out it's a V4.
Uh-huh.
Like that's just amazing to me. Like,
Yeah,
and then
they're always when I go to buy parts at like one of the auto parts places like Advanced Auto or whatever,
mhm.
they pull it up 1973 Saab, and then it comes down to the engine. You're like, oh, V4, and he's like, the guy's like, hey, come over here. This guy's actually got a V4.
Yeah, like we found the one guy. Yeah, I don't know how often you go to these places because like I just enjoy like even when I had my little stupid Mercury Tracer, I'd always go to auto parts place to pick up parts, and it always tickled me pink when people would be like, "Oh, you have a tracker, like a Chevy Tracker?" Like, no, no, it's a Tracer, like Tracer Mercury. Like, I never heard of that. Like, it's a just put fucking Ford Escort in there, that you'll be fine. Or, or like my Volvos when I show up and you get the new guy and he's like, "So all I'm seeing here is five cylinders. Is that right?" Yeah, that's right. That's what it has. I had never heard of a five cylinder before, and then V4. Probably and it's such a great little engine, and I don't know, like you're telling me it makes the car like decent to drive because it's
Yeah, it's actually it's very interesting because it has for a compact car of its era, 1973.
hmm
It's got a lot of low end torque. Um, They had I mean, the 1.7 liter low compression V4 puts out, 92 foot pounds of torque at 2,200 RPM.
yeah.
And like if you were driving, the Datsun or the Civic or anything like that, you'd have, 70 something, foot torque, and you'd be putting them out at the higher RPM.
Yeah.
So like one of the advantages is that you can really just put the car in a higher gear and you lug your way up to higher speed. I mean, once you get into third, you can go down to 15 miles an hour or go up to 55, and it can just do that because it's got the low end grunt for that.
Yeah.
And other compact cars of the era really couldn't. Like even my 1982 Tercel, when you were on the highway and you came to a hill, you
Hmm.
just had to put the pedal to the floor and hope you didn't have to downshift.
Yeah.
Um, but with the Saab, you just give it a couple millimeters more gas and it just goes up the hill. It doesn't care.
Yeah. It it's a light car, but it is like more power than you need. It weighs probably like maybe like 500 pounds less than like a modern Fiesta, but it's not that far off in terms of power to weight ratio. Like my wife's Fiesta is it's 120 horsepower and it's 110 pound-feet of torque, and that's like a brand new. It might be more than that, like 120, 120. But that's like a brand new 2014 car, and then you have a car from the 60s that's putting out torque numbers, with power to weight really close to that, and that's
Uh-huh.
amazing to me, like how drivable those cars are now. And like we don't get a lot of like that generation Saab up here in like Maryland and Virginia, but we get the next generation of Saabs, like early 900s and everything, that these old Swedish cars like Volvos and Saabs somehow remain drivable and like in a modern context like today. And it's so fascinating to me that they're able to do it. And it is kind of with that weird engineering aspect of like, well, let's put a V4 in it and see what happens. Like,
Uh-huh.
and it wasn't by plan, but it ended up working out because that's you, again, you know the story. You told me it's a Ford Motor Company designed that engine for the Falcon.
Well, what happened was when the Falcon came out, Ford had a plan to introduce a car that was going to be slightly smaller than the Falcon, to slot in under the Falcon and compete head to head with the Volkswagen Beetle.
Hmm.
And so they drew up plans for this V4 engine, but then the Falcon ended up selling really well. So they're like, oh, we don't really need this car. And they sent the blueprints over to Ford Germany, and Ford Germany, started making that engine for their own cars.
Yeah,
And when Saab decided they needed to replace the two-stroke, they were looking for anything that they could fit, in the same space as the three-cylinder.
yeah.
And pretty much the only thing that they could fit in there was, the Ford Germany V4 was the only engine that they could get in the same space. So that's what they ended up using.
Mm. And that's kind of brings me to a point of like it's so fascinating that these are kind of like these countries like first efforts after the war at like a people's car. And like I just want to briefly talk about kind of what we touched on in the lost episode, I guess is now what I'm just going to call it. Like like it's so fascinating to me that like it kind of is a blessing and a curse that like we as Americans got into like the automotive like field so early on. Like our people car was a Model T, and that's great, but it doesn't even share like the pedal assembly like with a modern car. Like you or I couldn't hop into one of those and not have some guy with way too long of a beard not spend like 30 minutes explaining to us how to work one of those. And like these like little cars like the little Subaru 360 and like the Saab and like Beetles and like even to an extent like the Minis, it's like they kind of, it sucks, they basically all got bombed into oblivion at a certain extent, and you know they had to rebuild and they needed cheap reliable transportation, but it kind of gave them an opening where you end up with these little lovable cars that are like a Falcon today would not work on the road. Like that it had a
uh-huh.
weird, goofy, was a two-speed transmission in it, and like the final drive is 1-to-1, and it just doesn't work. Like it doesn't have the horsepower. The car weighs too much, and it's just not usable. Sorry, Mister Regular, but it's one of those like you can go pick up a Mini now that's from the 19 excuse me 60s, and you can drive it now and it works, or even a Subaru 360, which you would think would not work on modern American roads, but it's kind of drivable, like not maybe so much of
Uh-huh.
I don't like even
Well,
like a
I
two
think
seat. Hmm?
it's one of those things where, because American automakers were out there first,
Yeah,
they kind of got set in their ways before newer, better technologies, were developed.
yeah,
And, with all the European companies and Japanese companies after World War II, rebuilding basically on a clean slate, they could do anything really. They weren't having to, tie down. If you look like at the American cars that came out right after the war, they're basically just pre-war cars
Yeah.
that they put, new styling on top of.
Add some tail fins to it and call it a day, Craig. We're good to go. And I'll go smoke cigars and bang some hookers. So, but it's it's fascinating to me. Like, I don't know. I just love it. And again, something I'm sad we lost in the lost episode, but it's one of those things where you really don't get more of a like X country version of that car than that car that came out like right after the war.
Uh-huh.
And like again with the Subaru 360, like that's the first real car, and that's probably the most Japanese car you can probably pick up today.
Uh-huh.
And like even like a Fiat 500, like there's probably no more like Italian car than a Fiat 500, or more French car than a 2CV, or you know Sweden kind of escaped a lot of the damage from the war, but like even those like early 60s or like mid late 60s even, like Volvos and Saabs, like they're very like Swedish, and it's amazing to me that like they're still usable and drivable, and then the cars we're left with in like the early 60s and like the late 50s, they're not really usable as like a daily driver today, and that's kind of like sad to me. Like
Uh-huh.
like and you don't you can't really complain about those early cars. Like a Mini, like it's small and it's reliable and it's not like girly, like cute, but it's just lovable. I guess it's you can't put it down. You just don't want to. It's like almost like a little brother. Like
Uh-huh.
it's trying and it's good and it's there.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a puppy. It's like
Yeah,
a puppy version of a car.
yeah. I guess that's the way we put it. Like it's not like oh it's cute, it's girly. It's like oh it's cute. I just want to love it and like feed it food until it gets big and fat and chubby. Like, and even when they break, like you can't really hate on them. It's just like, oh, it's so old, and it's fine. And we'll get you, a new like crosslink or like whatever we need for it, or new car parts escaping me, new transmission. That's fine. Just wait there. It's not your fault. You're just old. Like it's kind of like the best part of having a puppy and an old dog. Like it's old and it's reliable, and you just can't help but love it. And then on the flip side of it, it's just adorable and you just want to love it. And like I know we kind of touched on it. It like Austin's car culture doesn't really go for the historic scene, but
Uh-huh.
the people down there, like when they see the Saab and they kind of like get it, like how did they like? I'm sure you've been approached a couple times and like had people talk to you and ask you questions about it.
Yeah, it's very neat. There's not really that much of an old car scene in Austin, but people do see the Saab and they recognize that it's not a typical car. And there's also people who they know what Saab is, but they've
Hmm.
never seen a '96 before, so they're interested. They want to know what is this Saab that I've never seen before. So it does get a lot of interest, and there's people are always commenting or asking questions, and I get thumbs up from people.
Yeah.
Um, like I said in the last one, like just recently, I was driving along, and some guy pulls up alongside of me in a '70s Dodge Dart
Hmm.
and gives me a thumbs up and says, "Nice car," and then immediately just flips a U and drives off.
Yeah. It,
I have no idea who that was.
yeah. It's kind of like the blessing and the curse of like car culture. Is like, oh, I know that car, and I want to give that guy props. And now that I've done that, I have nothing else to do, and I don't know what to say. So I'm just gonna turn around and go away. So again, like we're not all like big, fast, like furious. Like I need to get myself and like I live my life at a quarter mile at a time. Like we're not that. We're like, oh my god, it's a goofy old sob, and I need to go congratulate that guy. And um, what's so fascinating to me, about your car history in particular is there's not what anyone would consider like a normal car anywhere in there, and that's so interesting to me. And like we talked about, like the reason you got into these types of cars and the reason you kind of like these cars is like because of their like weird mechanical quirks. And that's
Uh-huh.
that's how you got into it. So like, there's not a normal car there.
Yeah,
Actually,
I mean, really for me, the most interesting part is how the car works. I don't really care too much about, the styling or how fast it is. I just like, seeing how things are put together and seeing if someone came up with either a novel or an innovative way to, to solve something. So the cars I like the most are the ones that have they're either they introduced something revolutionary or they just found a different way to get something done, but it still works right.
yeah. It, it, here's another question for or interesting way to break it, like a front wheel drive scooter, fucking French. But it's if you could go and just pick up a car, like unlimited budget, you ideal two car garage, like what are you getting and putting into that little garage of yours? Like money's no object. Putting you on the spot here a little bit, so I'll kind of vamp a little bit to give you time to think of a couple answers here. But
Hmm.
like there's nothing in my mind like I love like weird goofy Volvo-ness, and that's kind of where I'm coming from with that aspect. Like, maybe like a V60 like Polestar, one of those new ones, and then maybe like a Focus RS, and that's kind of like my weird goofiness is like ends there. Like I love new cars, but money no object. I'm still probably buying like a goofy Ford Focus that's all-wheel drive, that's way too much horsepower, and then a way too much horsepower Volvo station wagon. But like, I wonder where your mind would go with that. Like,
Um, it's a tough question.
yeah,
I would probably end up getting another Subaru 360,
hmm,
um, just because it's such a fun car to drive,
yeah,
and it's such an easy car to work on. And then I'd either have to find, I feel like I'd have to balance it out somehow, something that's completely opposite. So maybe something like a early Land Rover, like a Series 2 or something like that, or
hmm,
maybe like a some sort of supercar like a Stratus or Stratus would be
hmm,
really awesome. Um, just
yeah,
to bring some balance into it, we can have one really tiny slow car
yeah,
and just have like one really fast, sleek, stylish car, but that's still really interesting in its own way,
yeah.
or like some off-road beast.
Hmm. I've yeah, that I was so curious as to where your mind would go, and for some reason, like the Stratos is such a great little car. Like it's a supercar, but it can go off road, and that's just
Uh-huh.
crazy to me. And like, and it's weird and it's Italian, so that's kind of I like perfect. Like that's what you would get as an ideal two-car garage. Technically, like a one and a half car garage because it's the little
Pretty
360 is
much.
so small. But like getting back to something kind of we talked about, like no, I totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. No, so again, thanks for being on the show. There was right when we disconnected, there was some story you wanted to say if when we did come back, and I'm totally blanking on it, and I
Oh yeah.
apologize for that.
Well, we were talking about the car community and just being friendly, being car people.
Yeah.
And I had a story from Bob Sinclair,
Hmm.
who was the CEO of Saab America for a while. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. But he was the nicest guy. He was just open to talk to anybody. If you're talking about cars, he wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I got into contact with him because I was looking for some information on Subaru 360s. And when Bob worked for Volvo in the 70s, Volvo and Subaru both stored their same cars in the same warehouse.
Hmm.
And obviously, Subaru could fit a lot more cars in there.
Yeah.
But Bob was telling me about that, and he had another great story from later on when he was working with Saab. He had an experience where he imported a East German Wartburg,
Uh-huh.
and the Wartburg is a lot like the old two-stroke Saab that has a three-cylinder two-stroke engine and front-wheel drive. But
Hmm.
otherwise, they're completely different. It's a very boxy car.
Yep.
But they made them, from the mid '60s up until like 1991 or '92, right after the Berlin Wall got torn down.
Yeah.
And he imported one, I think, in like '89, and he imported it for testing and a valuation. Ostensibly, that's how he got into the country.
Yeah.
Um, but apparently, the EPA found out that he imported this car, and they were very unhappy that someone was driving this Wartburg with its two-stroke engine around on American roads, and eventually ended up getting impounded and crushed because it was such a danger to the American public.
That East German cars, like, if you don't know anything about East German cars, they're all terrible. Um, they did not make Soviet Russia, Soviet bloc countries, all awful. And I can't imagine like how much pollution that was putting out, but I can't imagine the CEO of Saab driving around in America in a East German car. Did he use it as daily driver? Is that what he was telling you? Or
Um, I don't think so. I think it was just kind of like something fun
yeah,
that he brought over just to have fun with.
like pull out at
Uh,
parties like, "You ever drive an East German car?"
pretty much.
Yeah. Well, cuz
And yeah, it was. I mean, basically, it was never changed.
yeah,
The people that ran the factories wanted to update these cars,
yeah.
but the East German government wouldn't give them the funds to do it. So they'd be like, oh, well, 10 years on into production, our major change is disc brakes on the front.
Yeah.
And that was it for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Slightly automatic transmission, like, but only if you're missing an arm. Otherwise, you're stuck with the manual. Like, oh man, I don't know about you. And here's another random off topic thing. I don't know about you, but I somehow love like those old East German cars, and I would love to get my hands on like some of them. I'm sure that would not work out, like trying to get one here in America, but they're so awful they become lovable again, like almost like a broke puppy, I guess, to keep the analogy alive.
I think one of the well, I think pretty soon they're all going to be legal for importation. They're all going to be over 25 years old.
Yeah.
And but that it's interesting because when those cars came out in
Mhm.
the 1960s, they were very much competitive with other 1960s cars,
Yeah.
but then they never updated them,
Yeah. Like,
pretty
job's
much.
done. We're good. Communism's gonna last 1,000 years. We never need to touch the cars. We're good. What do you mean advancements? Like, no, we don't need anything. Like, no, pneumatic windshield wipers are fine. No one's ever gonna invent an electric. All right. So we're back on. Of course, it had to crash again because that's how it works. But we basically only lost a second, so that's good. So not what happened last episode, the lost episode, because I think I would go out back and kill myself. So, oh man, that was bad. No, we were talking about East German cars, and I don't know how much you know about them, but and again, I would love to get my hands on one. And the thing is, yeah, they'll be free from like to be able to be imported, but I just can't imagine paying someone decent money to import one of those to the United States. Like, if I could find one here for cheap, like that's a car you don't want to spend more than like a couple $100 on because it's not going to
Uh-huh.
work well. I can't imagine paying like an importer like a grand or two to like ship it over. Like, there needs to be a better way. Can we just like, you know what they should do? They should just put them on rafts and just push them out to sea. And just if they make it to the United States, they make it. And that's
Uh-huh.
just how it should work. Like, I don't know if they're. Do you have a favorite of the East German cars? I can't even
Um,
like.
it's interesting. I mean, the Wartburg is definitely the better of the two.
Yeah,
But the Trabant is kind of more interesting. It has a more interesting
mhm,
backstory behind how it was developed and how they built it.
yeah,
And if you've ever seen like if you go on YouTube, you can find some good videos of the factory of the Sachsenring factory where they built the Trabants, and it's crazy because the cars. I mean, first of all, because the outer body was made of Duroplast
yeah,
instead of stamped metal. They've got a whole big part of the factory where they basically they're basically manufacturing lint,
yeah,
and then they put the plastic resin sheets over the lint, and they press them in a giant press, and steam comes out, and they form the parts of this car. And then someone actually has to come in with like a bandsaw and cut out the shapes, for the cars. So it's really crazy stuff.
Yeah,
Um, and I find that really amusing.
yeah,
But yeah,
it,
I think the Trabant would probably be the more fun one to own because it's just more weird.
yeah. You know what? That the thought of it is, it's almost like Saturn in a weird way. Like, what can we possibly make a car out of? What about plastic body panels? Because I've seen someone hit a Trabant with a hammer and it just does nothing to it. Like,
Uh,
it's you go, oh, there's no way this like weird like material is like harder than steel. And no, that shit for whatever stupid reason. I'm sure it weighs a ton too, because it's like basically like plastic molded resin with like the wool and lint, as far as I understand. Is that kind of,
uh-huh.
and it's hard as fucking nails, and I don't get it. But yeah, I'm trying to think. Is that the weird one to Trevant? I'm kind of mixing my thing up, and it's weird to me that you know so much about East German cars. But now that I know you've driven a Le car and front wheel drive scooter, not so much. But is that the weird? What's the weird one where they built it alongside with the Fiat plant? I'm trying to remember which one that is. I don't know if you know.
Oh, you might be. Are you thinking of the Lada?
Yes, the Lada. I couldn't come up with my head with that. Yeah, the Lada. I kind of want one just because it's like a weird, like dystopian future of what Fiat may have become. Like,
Yeah, they had Fiat. You know, they gave their designs to everybody. You
yeah,
know, the Lada was built, you know, for the Soviets, and then they sent designs to Yugoslavia. I mean, the Yugo is basically just a Fiat under the skin.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's almost like brazen. Like, you know, it's bad when you like if you're handing out your designs and people are copying them, normally that would be a compliment. But when you're Fiat and you're like, yeah, yeah, it's good, best design ever, like hand out to everyone, like no, no, everyone, like you're welcome, w- like no, it's just like the wiring, I don't know, just a lot of like, I just want one, but I don't want to pay the money for it, so.
yeah,
So I don't know. I guess that's a good place to end. David, thank you so much for being on the show again.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
no problem. Again, anytime you want to come back on, you're a joy absolutely to talk to. Um, you don't really have anything to plug, so we'll kind of just call it there. Like again, you don't want like a Twitter or Facebook or anything like to like for people to
Nah, I
stalk you. Like no.
don't got anything like that.
All right. Again, thanks so much for being on the show, David. Just hang on the line for a quick second after this, and when we hang up, and everyone go to iTunes, rate us 5 stars. That's like the best thing to help us out. We made it up to 16 in the automotive section, so that was amazing a couple weeks ago. So please just keep like liking us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook now. I think we're on there. Go to the Oppo Meets thing. Go send us emails on Gmail, untitled@gmail.com. Again, thanks so much for listening, and have a good night or good day or whatever the hell you're listening.